everyone, and welcome to the Florida Museum 360 virtual field trip experience, Giants of Florida's Prehistoric Past. We will discover the stories of the Columbian Mammoth, American Mastodon, Megalodon Shark, Megalodon's ancestor, terror bird, and giant ground sloth, including how they got so big and why they went extinct. Today's event is brought to you by the Florida Museum of Natural History and the UF Thompson Earth Systems Institute's Scientist in Every Florida School program. Located on the University of Florida Gainesville campus, the Florida Museum is one of the nation's top 5 natural history museums in the United States. Its mission: to combine research, preservation, and interpretation of both biological diversity and cultural heritage. Scientist in Every Florida School is a free program housed within the Thompson Earth Systems Institute at the University of Florida. The SES program connects and builds long-term partnerships between teachers and scientists in order to bring current scientific research and big data into classrooms in Florida and beyond. Today's virtual field trip will be led by Dr. Bruce MacFadden. MacFadden is the curator of fossil vertebrates and director of the Thompson Earth Systems Institute. TESSI's mission is to advance communication and public understanding of current research discoveries about Earth's natural systems. Those are air, land, water, and life in Florida and beyond. He's also been part of UF faculty since 1977 and is a distinguished professor. He received his bachelor's degree from the Cornell University and his PhD in geology from Columbia University with a specialization in paleontology. To kick things off today, Alberto, our museum outreach coordinator, will be guiding us through the museum along with Dr. MacFadden. Alberto?
Hi, everyone. So I will be navigating us through the tour. So buckle up and get ready to experience the giants of Florida's prehistoric past. And if you have any questions, please write them down in the chat and we will answer them during our Q&A session. So when we think of giant prehistoric animals, probably the first thing that comes to mind are dinosaurs, right? But so if you did our previous 360 tour, in the fossil hall, you already know that there were no dinosaurs in Florida's past. But we did have animals that were at least 30% larger than any of their living relatives. And these animals are collectively referred to as megafauna, okay? And this basically means big animals. So that said, before we begin our tour with Dr. Bruce MacFadden, I actually wanted to ask all of you a question. Okay, so I want you all to participate here and write your answers down in the chat. And the question that I have for you is, if you look at our 360 tour that I'm moving right now on your screens, I want you guys to answer. Does this giant remind you of an animal that lives today? So if you know the answer to that question, please write it down in the chat. All right, again, does this giant remind you of an animal that lives today? Let's see. Yes, an elephant, elephant, elephant. Yes, an elephant, elephant. I think it's pretty unanimous here. So Bruce, let's see. Is our audience correct to believe that the elephant is related to this animal that they're looking at?
Alberto, can you hear me okay?
I can, yes.
Good. Well, before I get started with our program, I just want to say hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us. I'm Bruce MacFadden, and I'm excited to take you on this tour of a half dozen of prehistoric giants from our exhibit halls at the Florida Museum of Natural History in Gainesville. Okay, to answer your question, elephant is correct. This particular skeleton on display here is of the Columbian mammoth, and this mammoth is indeed related to modern elephants. It also is a sister species of the woolly mammoth, now extinct, that lived in colder regions of the Northern Hemisphere. And you can see this picture here in the display with the woolly mammoth on the left and the larger Columbian mammoth on the right.
So Bruce, since they lived in these colder regions in Northern Hemispheres, so is that why the woolly mammoths have all this fur?
Absolutely. It was to protect this animal from the really cold temperatures of the permafrost and other icy areas during the ice ages in the past. And this is what we know about the woolly mammoth. And the Columbian mammoth, on the other hand, did not have hair. like the woolly mammoth or a thick fur because it lived in warmer regions that were subtropical or temperate during the ice ages.
Awesome.
Yeah, so let's learn some more. The Columbian mammoth stood about 12 or 15 feet tall. It's estimated to have weighed about 20,000 pounds. This particular skeleton was collected by Florida Museum paleontologists from a river in northern Florida. We've dated this animal and know it lived about 16,000 years ago, and its skeleton is mostly the real deal, meaning it's mostly real fossil materials, although the lower jaws and the tusks that you can see front on here are actually made of fiberglass because the tusks and the lower jaws weighed over 500 pounds, the both of them. And if we had put those on display, we were worried that the skeleton would literally topple over in front because of the massive weight in front of the skull. So that's why the skull and, why the jaws and tusks are of fiberglass. We actually have the original materials in our research collections. Finally, I wanted to say that mammoths became extinct in Florida about 10,000 years ago after the last ice age, and we'll revisit the matter of mammoth extinction at the end of our tour today.
Awesome. All right, so let's move on to our next giant, which is also related to mammoths. So bear with me here. We're going to start moving through the museum virtually. Little by little, we're going to get to our next stop. All right, and here we are. Okay, so we're standing in front of a mastodon. Okay, so Bruce, what's the difference between a mastodon and a mammoth?
Yeah, both of these animals lived in the same ecosystems alongside one another during the ice ages, but their body proportions are totally different. The mastodon is squatter and more massive, and the mammoth is taller and not quite as massive as the mastodon. In addition, the teeth tell paleontologists a lot about differences in what these animals ate. On the right-hand side, you can see the tooth of a mastodon with those bulbous parts of the teeth. There are about 8 of them, and that indicates to paleontologists that the mastodon ate soft leafy vegetation like from leaves off trees. On the other hand, the flat grinding plates of the mammoth on the left-hand side of this display indicates an animal that was feeding on grass, and those grinders were used to basically feed on abrasive grasses during the ice ages. I want to tell you a little bit more about the mastodon. The skeleton that we see here was collected from nearby the mammoth from the same river system. And again, like the mammoth, it consists mostly of the real bones. It stood about 8 to 10 feet tall, so it was not as tall as the mammoth, and it weighed about half what the mammoth was estimated to weigh. So the mastodon likely weighed about 10,000 pounds. That's what paleontologists estimate based on its body size and proportion. Whereas the mammoth is a close relative of the modern elephant, we might say that the mastodon here is more of a cousin of the mammoths and the modern elephants. And like the mammoth, the mastodon became extinct in Florida about 10,000 years ago after the last ice age.
Great. So let's walk over to one of our more popular giants in the museum. So here we go to our next stop. And this is basically Megalodon, and Megalodon is known as the largest and most fearsome predator in the ocean. So how do scientists know how big this animal was?
Yeah, Alberto, so this is difficult because, as we'll learn in just a few minutes by looking at a reconstruction of the skeleton, sharks don't have bony skeletons like other vertebrates do. And the way what is normally fossilized in fossil sharks is their giant teeth. And I think we have a close-up of some of those teeth in a photograph here. Perfect. And you can see the megalodon tooth, which is the large charcoal gray tooth on the left, compared alongside a mako and a modern great white shark to the right. This tooth is about 5.5 inches long. And this particular animal, this particular tooth and its size allows paleontologists to estimate the overall size of the animal when it was alive. We estimated that tooth that you just saw to have pertained to an animal that was about probably 50 or 60 feet long. Some of the largest megalodon teeth that we've ever seen are sometimes upwards of 7 inches long, which would have pertained to an animal whose body size would have been estimated to be about 60 or 70 feet long, even more so, even larger than, say, a modern day school bus. People also ask me, how much did Megalodon weigh? And it's really a difficult thing to estimate, but possibly 25 to 50,000 pounds. So that was a very, very large shark in ancient ecosystems. It wasn't the largest animal that's ever lived in the oceans. In fact, modern large whales are twice the size of what we estimate to the Megalodon to have been. This particular jaw on the right-hand side includes teeth that were collected from 2-million-year-old sediments from along the St. Johns River in Florida. Megalodon is related to modern mako and great white sharks, and I think we have a photograph of this. You can see this right here. So just like makos and great whites are top predators in their modern ecosystems, the Megalodon was a top predator in ancient ecosystems before it became extinct about 2 million years ago.
All right, so every time I go to a museum, I always see jaws of sharks displayed. So why don't we ever see their skeletons?
Alberto, yeah, that's a good question. So let's walk over to our next stop in this tour, please.
All right, here we go. Oh, I think I know where you want us to stop. I think right about here.
Perfect. So suspended from the ceiling of the fossil hall, you can see this shark, this reconstructed shark, and it includes the fiberglass jaws and the teeth like we saw in the display case at our last stop, but it also includes a steel sculpture. And the reason we have that steel sculpture and not the real bones is because the skeleton of sharks is, unlike other vertebrates, its skeleton is composed of cartilage, and cartilage is a soft material that doesn't fossilize. So we therefore, the only thing we basically know about the fossil evidence of sharks like Megalodon and its ancestor that you can see depicted here is of its teeth, and we have to basically reconstruct the rest of the sculpture, the rest of the body size in this steel sculpture based on estimates that we would derive from the size of the teeth. And we wanted the public to understand what the body form of a Megalodon and its ancestor looked like. That's why we had the artist fabricate this beautiful steel sculpture, really this abstract steel sculpture of the body form of the ancestor of Megalodon. This particular ancestor of Megalodon lived about 25 million years ago in the oceans around the world. It was about 25 feet long. And this is really a wonderful example of what a fossil shark body form would have looked like. And there are very few of these on displays in other museums.
Cool. So what happened to Megalodon and its ancestors? Although actually let's ask the people participating here. So I want you all to participate in the chat again. So what do you guys think? What happened to Megalodon and its ancestors? Take a guess. What do you think? What might have happened to Megalodon and its ancestors? Let's see what we have here on the chat. Okay, so I see the food source started to run out. Very good. It went extinct due to decline in ocean productivity, shortage of food, ice age cooled oceans. Gary says change in water temperature. Dominic, global warming. Yeah, wow, these are all great answers. So Bruce, do we know?
Well, I mean, we don't know for sure because we weren't there, but we suspect that, in fact, I think that that the audience's answers to the questions are all really good. Climate change, change in food resource, running out of food. The other thing that I'm not seeing too much about is that a new fearsome top predator evolved in ancient ecosystems several million years before the Megalodon, and that was the modern great white shark. And I think that in head-to-head competition between Megalodon and the great white shark. In certain respects, the great white shark likely was a more efficient predator than was Megalodon, and it, so to speak, outcompeted Megalodon for the rule of the space of the top predator in ancient marine ecosystems over the past 5 million years. Good answers to questions. Climate change, running out of food, and competition from other predators is what paleontologists have thought to be good explanations for the extinction of Megalodon. I should also say that despite what they show on TV, Megalodon does not live today. And paleontologists do know that it did, thank goodness. Well, it'd be nice if we could see a Megalodon. We certainly wouldn't want to encounter one head on, but they are extinct today. They're not found anywhere in the earth anymore, unfortunately, except as fossils.
All right, that's good to know. All right, so now let's come back on land and to see what was living on ancient Florida. And we're going to move to our next stop right now. And we're going to be talking about this giant right here in front of us. And I'm going to ask this question again to our audience. Now, does this giant remind you of any living animal? So let's see. Again, if you think this animal reminds you of any living animal, we'd like to know. Let's see, I see Miley, ostrich. I see ostrich, shoebill stork. Maria, Diane says ostrich. Donald resembles a bird. Cassowary, that's very good. An emu. Excellent. These are all great answers, great guesses. Let's see. So Bruce, were we close?
Yes, these answers are really good. This animal was called Titanus, and you can see the reconstruction of the skeleton in this display right here. And the photograph that you showed, Titanus is actually an extinct animal. It's a bird, but it's an extinct animal with no direct modern descendants. So it's a flightless bird. So people were talking about emus and ostriches. Those also are flightless birds. This animal was a super predator at the time, though. Actually, its closest relative, it doesn't have anything to do with a modern emu or ostrich, other than the fact that they're all birds. But its closest relative is actually something called the Siriama from South America. And you can see the photograph of this animal, which is the closest modern descendant, or relative, I should say, of the extinct terror bird, or what we call Titanus. Terror bird fossils were found in the Santa Fe River bottom in northern Florida. This animal lived in Florida, the Titanus, that is, thank you, about 2 million years ago. But we only have bits and pieces of the skeleton of this animal. There are about 40 individual fragments, and the skeleton that you see is a reconstruction made of metal that paleontologists have designed based on the individual fragments that we put together like a jigsaw puzzle. Titanus stood about 7 feet tall, and it probably weighed about several hundred pounds. Interestingly, the ancestor of Titanus originated in South America, and Titanus walked across the Isthmus of Panama when it formed a land bridge between the Americas after about 5 million years ago. Titanus, for sure, was a top predator in Florida ecosystems and other places where it inhabited in other areas of southern North America over the past 5 million years until it became extinct.
All right, so let's go on and see another giant that originated in South America and migrated to North America about 2 million years ago. All right, so okay, here we are right now in front of the giant. So what is this giant creature we are looking at, Bruce?
Alberto, some visitors to our museum think that this is a dinosaur in our display, in our exhibit halls, but actually this is not a dinosaur. We don't have any dinosaurs in our Florida fossil hole because there were no dinosaurs in Florida. Dinosaurs became extinct before Florida became a peninsula. So this actually is a reconstructed skeleton of a giant ground sloth that lived in Florida. It was collected from a lime rock quarry near Newberry, Florida, just outside of Gainesville. It's about 20 feet tall, and paleontologists estimate that this particular skeleton, this particular animal in life weighed about 5,000 to 6,000 pounds. It lived in Florida from about 2 million years ago until these giant ground sloths became extinct throughout North America about 10,000 years ago. Like the terror bird, the giant ground sloth migrated from South America, where it originated, across the Panamanian land bridge during what paleontologists like to call the Great American Biotic Interchange between South and North America. The giant claws that you can see on its forelimbs made early paleontologists wonder if giant ground sloths were carnivores. But its flat teeth actually indicate that it was a plant eater. So what were these giant claws used for? Well, paleontologists think that these claws were probably used for defense against predators and also for grasping branches as the giant ground sloth was feeding on leaves of trees. Giant ground sloths themselves are completely extinct as a group, but they're most closely related to modern day two-toed tree sloths from Central and South America, as you can see in this photograph here. Thanks for bringing that up, Alberto.
Awesome. So I'm sure everyone must have this question. I certainly have this question. But before I ask Bruce, I want to ask you, the audience, what do you think? So why did these animals get so big? Okay, so let's see. Why do you all think, why did these animals get so big? Let's see your best guesses of why they got so big. Let's see what we have here. We'll open the chat and see. They had lots of food sources. Okay. Adaptations. Yep, they ate a lot. See that again, plenty of food. Competition, question mark. So maybe that's like lack of competition. No predators. Wow, resource partitioning. Thanks, Gary. That's very awesome. Lack of a predator from Charlie. Wow, these are all great answers. So Bruce, how close did we get?
Well, the audience is really smart because all the ideas for why animals like the megafauna got large in the fossil record relate to what they ate, where they lived, how they adapted, and how they fended off predators. So all these are really good answers to the questions. Some general thoughts related to the questions are that getting large is actually a pervasive pattern that we see as paleontologists in the fossil record. And it's happened time and time again over millions and millions of years. And actually, paleontologists call this phenomenon Cope's rule. Actually, explanations for larger body size, one size does not fit all, so to speak. And some animals might have gotten larger to evade predators, where other animals may have gotten large to eat more in terms of the kind of diet they have. So it really depends upon explanations for why animals got large, really depends upon the individual species that you're looking at and their specific adaptations to the roles they played in their ancient ecosystems.
Great. Yeah. So there's like basically like no cookie cutter answer for this. It could have been many different reasons. Very interesting. So, well, let's talk now about why these land megafauna became extinct. And to do that, we're going to continue. We're going to move on to our, actually, this is going to be our last stop in our virtual tour. And we're going to stop here. And we're going to talk about what we're seeing here. So, Bruce, what are we looking at?
Yeah, so this is our late Pleistocene mural that depicts life in Florida about, 10 to 12,000 years ago. It shows humans hunting large megafauna like the mammoths that you see depicted here. And if you get a close-up of the bison, the extinct bison skull from the Ice Age of Florida from about 10 to 12,000 years ago, you actually can see in the upper part of its skull right there, that's actually a projectile point, a spear point that's embedded in the skull of this bison, which indicates direct evidence of hunting from humans of large megafauna like the giant extinct bison.
Very cool. So, but humans didn't cause the extinction of all these animals, or did they?
Well, that's a really difficult question. Maybe we should ask the audience, why do they think that these animals became extinct?
Sure. Why do you think that these animals might have gone extinct? Let's see. I want to see some your best guesses of other reasons why you think these animals might have gone extinct. A meteor? Okay, humans hunted them, as we saw. Habitat change, climate change, number of reasons, people killed them, predators, chill, kill, ill, pathogens, humans. I see meteor again. Excellent. Very good. Very good. How did we do, Bruce?
Again, the audience has covered all the bases of what paleontologists think about explanations for why the megafauna became extinct at the end of the Pleistocene. Some people like to say the chill, the kill, and the ill, so that the megafauna couldn't adapt to different changes in climate. That's the chill. The kill is that humans overhunted the megafauna to extinction. And then the ill is a third hypothesis that actually some of these megafauna may have succumbed to diseases that completely caused the extinction of that particular species. So all these factors are ones that have been used to explain why the megafauna became extinct by 10,000 years ago, not just in Florida, but throughout North America and globally for that matter.
Awesome. So this was our final stop, and I guess I actually wanted to wrap this up with some final thoughts from Bruce. So Bruce?
Yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this tour. I believe that our Florida's prehistoric giant allow us to reflect on understanding the past and provide lessons for us in the future. Getting large is not always a long-term advantage. As you can see, all the animals that we've seen today in this tour of Florida's prehistoric giants are no longer with us. Likewise, today, many of the Earth's animals are in danger of extinction. In fact, biologists fear that the Earth is losing 30,000 species per year as a result of human activity, and that we are facing a biological crisis that rivals the worst mass extinctions that we see in the past.
All right. So I am now going to pass it over to Brian, and we are going to start our Q&A session. So everyone, please make sure to write down any questions you have, and we could have Bruce try to answer them. All right, so take it over, Brian.
All right, so thank you so much for guiding us through the Florida Museum of Natural History. And Dr. MacFadden, thank you for sharing your expertise with us today. We have quite a bit of questions that have already come in, so I'm excited to jump right into it. Dr. MacFadden, our first question comes from Jennifer, who asks, could the Mastodon and the Mammoth have lived in the same time and maybe interacted with each other?
That's a good question. We know that they did live at the same time, and if they interacted with each other, it was sort of a passive activity because they actually divided up their habitats and ecosystems, because primarily the mastodons fed on leafy vegetation. They were browsers, whereas the mammoths would have hung out in the prairie grasslands to feed on the grasses. So they likely were in the same ecosystems. They could have seen one another, but they definitely were different species that were doing their own thing at the same time, and likely in generally the same place.
Our next question today comes from Rageshwar, who asks, what is the biggest mammal in the Florida Museum of Natural History?
Yeah, so it depends upon whether you're talking about weight or sheer size. So the giant ground sloth, being 20 feet tall, is likely the tallest animal. Which of the mammals in our museum was the largest in terms of its weight was probably the mammoth.
Heather is wondering, how can we be sure that there aren't any megalodon hiding in the deepest parts of the oceans anywhere in the world?
I love that question because it makes us wonder, and it also sells TV. They've never been found, and so far as we know, looking at the fossil record, after about 1.8 or after about 2 million years, no matter where you look in sediments that are younger than 2 million years old, that are marine, that ought to have preserved fossil teeth of megalodon, we never see them. We see evidence of great white sharks and other animals that have modern relatives, but we don't ever see any megalodon teeth. So I think they basically were gone forever by about 2 million years ago. And I just, as a paleontologist, based on the evidence that I know from the fossil record, I just don't think unfortunately, we're never going to find a megalodon living today. Just like people talk about the Loch Ness Monster. Again, that's been gone for 65 million years. So these are wonderful extinct creatures that we would like to see in the wild, but it's not likely that it's going to happen anytime soon.
Dr. MacFadden, Eric is curious. What is the most interesting or important fossil discovery from Florida? As well as, what is your favorite fossil animal and why?
Ooh. So it's absolutely impossible for me to say what is the most important fossil from Florida, because Florida has we have hundreds of thousands of fossils in our collections in our museum, and every one of them tell an interesting story. And some are different than the others in terms of the story they tell. So I really don't want to say which one is the most important fossil that's ever been found from Florida. I can tell you, though, what my favorite fossil group is, and that is, because I study fossil horses, I'm absolutely fascinated with change over time in the evolution of the horse family over the past 50 million years, which is something that I've studied for most of my entire career as a paleontologist since I was a graduate student over 40 years ago.
Vicky is wondering, how do you differentiate a dinosaur versus other animals?
Well, dinosaur has a particular group of characteristics that unite it in its own group. And there are two types of dinosaurs. They're the bird hip dinosaurs and the lizard hip dinosaurs. So the way you differentiate dinosaurs within the group of dinosaurs is based on the shape of various parts of their bones that are unique to and only found in dinosaurs.
Atticus is wondering, what hunted the ground sloth?
Really good question. My sense is probably large saber-toothed cats and lions that inhabited the Americas during the late Ice Age. And again, they're other part of the megafauna. We're mostly talking about, when you talk about the mammoth, the mastodon, and the giant ground sloth, we're talking about plant-eating herbivores. But we had large carnivores as well. In addition to the bird carnivore Titanus, we also had giant saber-toothed cats, Smilodon, as well as large lion-like animals that likely would have fed upon giant ground sloths.
All right, and we have time for just a few more questions. Our next one is going to come from Sybet, who says, humans are getting larger over millennia, right? Same reasons as other species being discussed? I think what I'm asking is, are humans undergoing the same phenomena?
So that's a really interesting and very complicated question. Humans have other aspects of their biology that are not natural, that affect nutrition. Things like nutrition affect the evolution of body size from one population of humans to the next. So I would say that the phenomenon that we see in the change of body size in human may be unique to humans because we're a different species in terms of our social makeup. And the explanations are different from what we see in naturally occurring ecosystems with ancient megafauna, for example.
Emma's wondering, how do we know what color these animals were? Or is it based on their environments around them and their lifestyle?
Yeah, good question. We don't really know for sure. Sometimes when we find animals like little deer that seem to have fed or tapirs, that's fossil deer or tapirs, we sometimes reconstruct them as having, they're smaller, the juvenile of those species is having spots on them the way modern fawns do, but really we don't know for sure. Color typically does not fossilize, so we really can only surmise the color of ancient species.
And our final question for today is going to come from Bonnie, who asks, are there any complete Titanus anywhere?
Good question, Bonnie. No. There are better preserved specimens of relatives of the Titanus called the forest rakids from South America that lived in South America in places like Argentina about 5 million to 8 million years ago. But from my knowledge, certainly they're better preserved than the 40 or so fragments that we have to understand Titanus. But I am not really sure whether there's a complete forest rakid Titanus ancestor in existence anywhere in South America.
All right, Dr. MacFadden, thank you so much for your time today and again, sharing your expertise with us. At this point, I'm going to turn things over to Stephanie to begin to wrap up today's session.
Thanks, Brian. What a cool experience today. Thanks everyone for joining us today on this Florida Museum 360 tour. We hope you've enjoyed the experience. I know I have. And we would love for you to take a moment to fill out the survey at the end of today's experience so that we can do better even next time. A special thanks to our guides, Alberto and Dr. MacFadden, who have shared a wealth of knowledge and some very interesting stories with us today. You can learn more about the Florida Museum and Scientists in Every Florida School by visiting the websites you see on your screen here. On both sides, you'll find additional opportunities like the one today to engage with us. And we also have a recording of today's program available at the UF Earth Systems YouTube channel. Again, thank you so much from the Florida Museum and from CEFS. Have a great day and goodbye.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.